it's Miss Meyer for another episode of the Miss Meyer Show. And today what we're going to be talking about is early, or are. We're going to be talking about are, not is, I would say. I don't know. Anyways, we're going to be talking about early cultures and the beginnings of human society today on the Miss Meyer Show. Okay. So the beginnings of human society, we're just going to go over them a little quickly. And we talked about them a little bit in class. We're just going to go a little bit more in depth. So the three periods of beginnings of human society that we talk about are the Paleolithic, the Mesolithic, and the Neolithic. Okay? Paleo, Meso, Neo. Okay? Those three root words right there. Neo means new, so you can always think that one goes first, okay? Meso is kind of like in the middle, M for middle, M for meso, meso means middle. And paleo, paleontologist, that's from the past, that one goes first. I don't know, it may or may not work, it's my own mnemonic device that works good for me, but each their own, to each their own. So the Paleolithic cultures were ones that, this is the first one, the first group, the Paleolithic. Now the Paleolithic period, and that's the Stone Age, okay? That's like the early caveman, what you're thinking of. That started about 2.5 million years ago and lasted until about 12,000 BC. Now the key word here is about. And that means that we don't exactly know when this period, was going on. It's an estimate. It really is. So it's like a guess. Okay? The Paleolithic culture, they hunted and they gathered food. So that meant they followed the animals wherever they went and those kinds of things. Oh, my hair's all wet. Sorry. Okay, they were nomads. They went from place to place. They were following the herds and the animals. They were following these things, these animals for food. So they, had to go where they were going. They had to follow the animals if they wanted to survive. The ancient people did not build permanent homes. Instead, they carried their tents with them, and that was so that they can go quickly. So if the animals were running and they were trying to find the woolly mammoth so that they could eat Christmas dinner or whatever, they would have to follow them to where they would go. And they needed a house that they could easily pick up and go. I mean, if they're getting like bricks and foundation and stuff like that, they're not going to be able to pick that up and leave and follow the animals or whatever. They're going to have something easy that they can easily move. So kind of like tents, kind of like teepees, something similar to that. They did make tools, and their tools were made out of stone, clay, and wood. Now, their tools aren't like what we see today, kind of like skill saws and sanders, hammers, and things like that. It was I guess it could be kind of like a hammer. They were more or less small things that sticks and stones that they would use to grind things, that they would use for eating, they would use for, weaponry, things like that. Those were the kind of tools that they did. They did not have, like, the tools that, your mom or your dad have in their man cave or whatever, okay? Like, my husband's got a bunch of tools he don't even use. It's a waste of money sitting in my garage. Anyway, yeah, I tried to sell them one time, and he found out, and then I had to not sell them. He said, "What are you doing taking pictures of all my tools?" I'm going to sell them because you don't use them. He's like, "No, you're not." So, whatever. But these were not the type of tools that these people used. They would use, like I said, in class, if you were in class, one of those really cool tools that they would use was kind of like a stick. And what they would do with that stick, like right here, is they would use this to dig out all the bone marrow in the bones of the animals that they killed, and they would eat it. It was like a delicacy. It was like M&Ms, right? My baby loves M&Ms. She'll pretty much do anything for M&Ms. except behave, because nothing makes her behave. She don't listen to anything. But they would love it. Bone marrow was like, oh yeah, bone marrow, and they couldn't get to it. They really didn't invent. They just used it. One of the tools that they used was that long stick, so they could dig out all that marrow, that yummy, gooey, fluidy, gross marrow, and just have at it, and it was some good stuff. That was one of the tools. Another tool that they would use was it was basically like a stone, and they would find the stone, and then they would shape it to make it kind of like a cup looking blade thing, so that it kind of looked like this, like a cup. What? Huh? Thank you. This is Kate just gave me this. This is a tool, but I would think this would be like a medieval tool. Not that they didn't have anything like this, but this is very cool. Thank you, Katie. So they would take a stone, and they would like chisel it down so that it would look kind of like a cup thing like this. And what they would do is they would take that cup thing, that stone thing, and they dig it into the animal that they had caught, and use it to like rip out their organs and get all that stuff out of them. It was kind of like a shovel kind of thing. They would take out the heart, and they would take out the lungs, they take out the stomach, and they'd scrape off the fat off of the body, and they'd splatter it all over themselves. Because remember, they use animal fat as mosquito repellent. So they used every part of the animal that they killed. That's the majority of their tools was for that purpose. The men hunted while the women cared for the young, and they gathered food. They lived in present-day Africa, Southeast Asia, China, and Europe. It spread out everywhere because at this point in time, the land bridge was connected. So it was much easier for people to go from one area to another. There wasn't huge Atlantic and Pacific oceans separating continents at this time. Continents were much closer together. And even if you look at how the continents are shaped, you can see it's kind of like a puzzle. You can put together, they all go together. So, and that's because they were once close together. So these people could easily go from North America to Europe. And in fact, continents weren't shaped like they are today. So travel was much easier. They weren't having to go, it didn't look like it did today. So the Paleolithic people went everywhere. They spread all over, with the exception of Antarctica. Now, wooden digging sticks, the ones that I just told you how they dig the bone marrow out, those were the first tools that the Paleolithic people used. They later used stone axes, and those were really kind of like the stone cup thing that they used to dig out the organ from the body, except instead of carving the stone like a cup, they would carve it flat, kind of like an axe. And they would use that to cut down trees for numerous reasons that they would use the trees for. Then, as time went on, they would use stones, and they would chisel them into knives. They would chisel them into spears and arrows to hunt the animals. Needles to make cloth, to make clothing. Clubs and shields, and all of these items were made to help them survive. They were all survival mechanisms. In these early Paleolithic communities, there was no government. There was no president. There was nobody like that because people didn't survive for long periods of time. This was a dog-eat-dog world. Okay, you could have a leader and be like, "Oh yeah, we're all gonna listen to John. He's our leader." They turn around, John gets eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. Okay, so they can't have some serious formal government. It was people kind of organized loosely around natural leaders and followers. I mean, anybody who just, John got eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, here comes Sally. Go ahead, girlfriend. You're the leader now. Then Sally goes and falls off a cliff. She dies. So then we would need somebody else. They could not have an election and a democracy like what we have today. They basically just had to have whoever was the next one to step in line was going to be the new leader. And that's because life was so very precious. Life is always precious, but, it was so, oh, gosh, it was just easily taken away. I mean, there were so many things that could end your life. You know, it was just really, really, really dangerous. And especially because they were nomads, they were going from place to place. They were really, really dangerous because they were out in the elements. You know, it was snowing, it was sun, it was all kinds of stuff. Tornadoes, rainstorms. They were dealing with it all. They did develop eventually into a little bit more of an organized group, and that's when we see the beginning of the Neolithic culture. And what helped the Paleolithic culture kind of advance into the Neolithic culture was that the development of fire, basically. Fire made it possible for the Paleolithic community to stay in one place for a little bit longer. Because of the fire, they didn't have to leave and follow the animals and things like that in the roughest times of weather. So, like, you know, they could cook food, they could, you know, keep themselves warm, they could do these things. It gave them a sense of stability, and because they didn't have to constantly follow these animals 100% of the time, that made it so that they did not die. Okay, they were able to stick around. They were able to make it because they were staying stable in one spot for a little bit of time. Also, these Paleolithic people were also artists, and we see lots of their painting and lots of the caveman paintings that we have seen. There's a couple in Washington that you guys are going to see. We see them all over the place, and that also means that they were staying in places for longer periods of time. After the Paleolithic culture, we see the Neolithic culture, the Mesolithic culture, and that's kind of the middle period, and that lasts from about 12,000 BC to 8,000 BC. The Mesolithic culture is the in-between culture. It's kind of like a transition between the Paleolithic and the Neolithic. We're not going to even talk too much about the Mesolithic culture. We're just going to they're just kind of in between. The Neolithic culture was the earliest, the latest. This is the last one. Now, these guys used slash and burn techniques to clear forests to make farmland. So they're not hunters and gatherers. They're not chasing the animals for survival. They're staying in one place. They grew crops. Then the crops were grown on farms, and those crops became an important source of food. They domesticated animals, which means kind of made them their pets, and you know, used them for food, and for milk, and for clothing, and you know, travel. They domesticated goats, cattle, pigs for food. They're pretty much food. They used tools like the plow and the sickle. You might be like, "What's the sickle?" You ever seen the Grim Reaper? You know how he holds that kind of thing? It's kind of like a moon shape. That's a sickle, and its purpose is to slash down crops and so that you can eat them or cook them or do something with them. Sickles were to eat for grain. I think the plow could be used to bring nutrients to the surface of the soil before the crops were planted. So I'm in Texas, y'all, so I see all kinds of farm equipment that I have never ever seen in New Orleans. But a plow is like the big tractor that kind of rolls up all the mud, and when it's all kind of like rumbled and it's to the surface, you've got all those nutrients. So after you do that, you'll put the seeds in, and then the crops will grow better. You'll have more nutrients for the crops. The sickle is used to cut that grain. So if you are, you know, growing wheat or whatever, you're going to use your plow to get all those good nutrients so you can plant your grain, and then you'll use your sickle, your like little sickle, kind of this, and you would cut the grain, the crops when they're high. That's what you would do. They began using metals such as copper, lead, and gold for weapons and tools. You notice they did not use this for money. They did not use this to sell things and to do all those kinds of things. Gold, copper, and lead were used for tools. They were used for survival. They were used for weapons. They were used for those kinds of things. There was no money. This is early civilizations. There's no, trying to buy and sell things. This was just survival, basically. Um, they had huge stone structures called megaliths. Megalith. And they were created during this era, and they were probably used, we don't know what they were pretty much used for, but they might have been used for religious or spiritual purposes. There's an outing, I think next week, or this Friday, because you'll be watching this on Monday, but there is an outing on Friday to Poverty Point, and that is where you will see huge mounds from the Poverty Point Native Americans in early Louisiana history. These were these people. These people were the ones that, though they were building this. So if you go to Poverty Point, you are actually going to see the huge mounds, which is super cool, right? I know. I'm so excited for you, right? Okay. The Neolithic cultures, they also had a religion or a type of religion. They did not. It wasn't like Christianity or anything like that, but it was a religion. Historians believe that it was kind of just a worshiping of something bigger. Okay, that's what they were. It was not, like I said, Christianity, Judaism, Islam. It wasn't anything like that. It was just that they were worshiping something greater. That's what it was. And religion did exist before the Neolithic era, but we don't know exactly what was going on because we don't have any written records. We do have stone paintings that we can kind of go by, but those are really, really, they're very interpretive. Like, I can see one thing, you can see something else, but we don't have any written record of what was going on, what they were thinking, or what they were praying. So we just know that it was spiritual, which could mean a ton of different things. So moving on, we're going to talk about the Ice Age. The Ice Age! Who's your favorite character in Ice Age, Katie?
Mine has to be the baby.
The baby?
Yeah.
That's not a very good character.
No,
the teenager? Oh, you mean his daughter? Manny's daughter? I don't remember her name. But I like Sid. He's my favorite. And I like, what is the saber-toothed tiger's name? What's the saber-toothed tiger's name? Do you know? What's his name? Do you remember his name? I don't know, but I like him. He's like, where's the baby? There he is. Anyway, alright, so, after the last Ice Age, the climate on Earth was extremely unpredictable. I mean, we think it's unpredictable now. It's really unpredictable in Texas. I sent my baby to the nanny's house one morning with a jacket on. The next day she's in shorts. It's like craziness. But the weather was really unpredictable after the first Ice Age. So several times, the global temperature would just drop significantly. And I'm not talking about like from 90 degrees to 70 degrees. I'm talking about like 90 degrees to like 30 degrees. I mean, super, super low. Well, global temperatures eventually leveled off and they remained stable for thousands of years, or relatively stable. I know it's all crazy. Like Louisiana is just as bad as Texas. Temperatures all over the place. Well, animal herds migrated based on the changing temperatures. So in cold times, just like birds do today, when it got colder, they moved south. When they started to warm up, they would move up to the northern areas. So because animals were the main source of food for these Neolithic and the Paleolithic and the Mesolithic cultures, they had to follow these animals. Really, Neolithic, they were able to stay in one spot, more or less, because they were farmers as well. But the Paleolithic and the Mesolithic, they had to follow these animals. So they were constantly moving with the herds. And those were the hunters and the gatherers. Once the climate became more stable, animals, humans, plants, they had much more opportunity to grow and to thrive, to flourish, to get bigger, to get better, to not die so easily, So maybe they could have this is when you start to see more of an emergence of government, of religion, of things like that, because they weren't just always on the move and trying to fight for their survival. They were actually kind of able to relax a little bit. People started to deliberately plant crops and gather other crops. The temperate climate in many areas allowed the crops to grow. people started to plant more crops, the hunter-gatherer society was eventually replaced with a society that was much more agricultural, where they planted and they raised crops rather than hunting and gathering food. So it is believed that the earliest humans, and these are believed, so this is not for 100%, this is just believed. So it's believed that the earliest humans lived in the East African Rift Valley, in what is today Ethiopia. Pigs and camels were the first domesticated animals in the Middle East, and as a result of the changes in climate, farming and grazing in the area became more difficult, and the animals eventually migrated to Africa and Asia, moving to survive. Ancient Egypt has been called, and these are just some basic just tidbits of information. Ancient Egypt has been called the gift of the Nile. So most of Egypt is very dry, but the people were able to thrive because they lived near the Nile River. The Nile River floods every year, and it makes the ground near it very, very fertile, because when it floods, well, let me straight up tell you, when animals die, and fish, when they die, and well, in ancient Egypt, a lot of times when people would die, they would send them out on except for pharaohs, and stuff, they would have the pyramids and all that kind of stuff. But pyramids were like for kings and stuff. But a lot of times in ancient Egypt, when people would die, they would set them on fire, they would burn their bodies, and those ashes would go into the water. So when fish would die, people would die, the fish would poop, all of that stuff would go to the bottom of the river. Spell, get that? Huh? Yes, just like that. They would go to the bottom of the river. And when the river would flood, all of those nutrients, really, would come to the top, and they would flood over into the banks of Egypt, making the soil there really, really, really fertile. Really fertile. And so that's why it was called the gift of the Nile. So the river would flood every year and make the ground fertile so that people could grow crops. And the river was also used as irrigation to water their crops, so their crops would grow and flourish. The Yellow River is considered the cradle of agriculture in China. From China, farming spread across what was once called Eurasia. Because like I said before, the continents were connected. And we didn't have Europe and Asia and Africa and North America. They were more connected. Europe and Asia were one continent at that time that we call Eurasia, not Europe and Asia. It's like a mix. You know how they put names together with celebrities? Like when they get married, like Brangelina? No? Whatever. But yeah, they do that. They do. Well, they did when I was in high school. It was all Brangelina. It was Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. Brangelina.
Meredith, and Eric.
Oh my gosh. My daughter's obsessed with Grey's Anatomy. And she's constantly telling me about it. And I told her today in the grocery, I said, if you tell me one more Grey's Anatomy story, I don't think I can handle it. But anyways, so they mashed the names together. So instead of being Europe and Asia, there are two of them now, or a one-some, or whatever, and they're Eurasia. So the Yellow River is considered the cradle of agriculture. And what does agriculture mean? It's farming, it's all these kinds of things. And from that area of the Yellow River near China, it's spread all across Eurasia through migration and contact with other societies, and really spread eventually to all over the world. Now, early humans arrived in Australia, which is down under the world. This is my Australian accent, okay? Okay. Oh, gosh, I got to think about the Wiggles, because the Wiggles are from Australia, and I got to think about what they sound like. We're the Wiggles. I'm Jeff. I'm Murray. And we're here today in Sydney, Australia. Does that sound Australian?
We put the shrimp on the barbie.
You put the shrimp on the barbie. That's kind of British. That's British.
Not English.
Put the shrimp on the barbie. I don't know. Whatever. I'll practice it and I'll see how I do. I don't know. Whatever. Okay, my kid said it's not good. Kate, do you think Mommy has a good Australian accent? Nobody's getting dinner tonight. I'm not even cooking. Okay. All right. So early humans arrived in Australia about 40,000. Remember, the key word here, guys, is about. These things can change. You could turn on the news tonight and they could be like, huge discovery. People got to Australia much earlier than we thought. So it's about. Dealing about what we have today, based on the data that we have today, we are thinking that the people came to Australia from 40,000 to 45,000 years ago and migrated over that huge land bridge in Southeast Asia. It was all like pushed together, guys. It wasn't like it was today. It's all like squished together. That's my squished together noise. Okay? So, civilizations, we're going to talk about right now, is just a civilization. So what is a civilization? A civilization is something that the hunters and gatherers did not have. They could not have because everybody was dying, okay? They were just like, you basically didn't know. Every day you woke up and you're like, I don't know, we all don't know, but you know what I mean. Okay, hunters and gatherers did not have a civilization. Civilizations have characteristics that distinguish them from the hunter and gatherer groups of the earlier times. They had agriculture. They were able to settle in specific areas. They had religion. They had a form of government. They had art. They had burial practices. Hunters and gatherers, if grandma died walking to follow the animals in the herd, they just leave her there. They weren't going to sit and bury her and do all this. So they're okay, bye, Grandma, bye. I mean, that's terrible, but that's exactly what happened. When we see the civilizations in the Neolithic culture, we start to see people having graves, having burials. So if you're going to bury somebody, you're going to actually be able, you're going to have the time to do that. Okay? So agriculture can be defined as the growing of crops. And this is one of the key terms of a society, is an agricultural society. When you start having agriculture, you don't have to move all the time. You could stay in one spot. You can plant your crops and you can live there and not have to follow the herd. So agriculture is one of the biggest factors of a civilization. Now, agriculture can be defined as the growing of crops and the domestication of animals, like cows, pigs, sheep, chickens, whatever. They were using these animals for food because they knew that they wouldn't have to go chase the woolly mammoth and, possibly die. So agriculture first appeared around 8,000 BC in the Middle East. That's where it first appeared. So we first see the signs of agriculture. You're like, Fire, what are you talking about? How do we see that? How do we know that? Well, archaeologists are able to find tools during this time period. Tools like the sickle. Remember I showed you like the Grim Reaper sickle? And they found plows and items like that dating back to that time period. Well, they're not going to make those tools if they did not use them to cultivate agricultural crops. Okay? So that's why we say about. That's what we're saying that. So, however, agriculture developed independently in different parts of the world during different times. For example, it developed in the North and South America, even though those continents did not have very much contact with the Middle East. Agriculture developed in the Guinea, West Africa, the Nile River Valley, the Ethiopian highlands, all about the same time, and independently of one another. So we see agriculture showing up, agricultural, clues showing up all over the world when they weren't interacting with one another. So that's why we call it the Neolithic time period, because we see groups, the people over in North America and South America were not interacting with the people in Asia. There was no way. They couldn't call each other up. They couldn't FaceTime. They couldn't do anything like that. They didn't even know that they existed. And they were both using agriculture at the same time. Okay? The development of agriculture led to more reliable sources of food than hunting and gathering could definitely do. They were able to grow crops. They were able to raise their animals. They were able to establish a permanent settlement and develop a civilization. Many civilizations were able to support people and even armies to protect themselves with the large amount of food that they grew on their farms. So not only was agricultural very important in establishing a civilization, but it was also, important in establishing a government, a religion, and a military in some form, some sense. Now, domestication allowed people to breed animals instead of hunting them, and this is where we really see differences in like dogs, and we start to see different breeds. Okay, one of my favorite things to do on Thanksgiving, I love it after the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, is the dog show. I love the dog show, and my favorite breeds, I'm always like, woohoo, breeds. I like the sporting group and I like the hound group. I like the sporting group because Beast, my beloved stinky lab, is a lab. He's a black Labrador, and so I was like, yeah, Labrador. And I like the hounds because Chance, my brother, he was my mom and dad's dog forever. He was a Basset Hound. He passed away though. He's an old boy, but I loved him. He was my mom and dad called him my brother. And when I moved to Texas, they would make me talk to him on the phone. They'd say, "Talk to your brother," and I would. I'd be like, "Hi, Chance." So whatever. So I'm always like, "Yeah, hound group, yay, sporting group." That's what this. But anyways, this is where we start to see different breeds. We start to see them coming up around this time. We start to see that they were deciding, okay, we want a dog that has longer hair, and we want a horse that can run faster, and we want this. So they start to have selective breeding. They were choosing to breed animals with favorable traits. So they decided, okay, we want a protecting dog, so we're going to breed this wolf with this dog, and we're going to get this. So they were using their big brains. And they were able to do that. So choosing animals with favorable traits were able to make animals that were stronger, that produced more meat or more milk, or were tamer, that they could use, for pets or whatever. The first animal to be domesticated for agriculture, the first ones for growing crops, for helping out in that, were goats and sheep. And I love goats. I love goats. I like the screaming goat. Goats make crazy screaming noises. I'm gonna include. I'll just go Google screaming goats. It's amazing. It is so good. I was laughing so hard I was crying watching the screaming goat. Okay, so one problem in these early agricultural societies was the spread of diseases from animals to humans. So unlike the hunter and gathering society where they were kind of on the move, they were outside, they didn't really deal too much with the animals, these farming societies were exposed to diseases that they had never ever encountered before. And those diseases, or two major diseases, were smallpox and measles. And these diseases were spread throughout domesticated animals. And there's no inoculation, there's no vaccine for smallpox or measles at that time. So people died from these diseases. So it was a whole new issue of death and worry. Okay? The invention of metallurgy. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. I'm going to say it the best way that I know how, and it's metallurgy. Now, metallurgy. No. No, that's a pen. Here, go sit over there and write on that book for me. It's right here. Okay. Metallurgy is the making of items with metal. It's kind of metal working. And they would use it to make tools and jewelry and weapons and things like that. And this is when we start to see people selling things. We start to see the emergence of money. So this is when we start to see, the buying and the selling and things like that. So some of the first metalworking societies included those of the Bronze Age and the Iron Age. Bronze was the first Bronze was first used to make tools because it had much lower melting point than iron. They didn't have to heat the fire quite so hot, and they could use bronze. So With the development of the higher temperature smelting techniques, that's when we start to see iron, because iron is a stronger metal than bronze, but it requires more heat in order to utilize it to make a weapon or jewelry or whatever. But the two metals kind of may weigh the same, and they were used for all kinds of things. Eventually, people realized that they could make it even stronger by mixing iron with coal, and they produced steel. So this is how it all came about. This is a civilization. They're using their natural resources that they have to produce weapons and, things like that. Okay? So I'm going to give you guys just a quick list of the characteristics that are common to most civilizations. And those are here, quick list. The presence of geographic boundaries and institutions, meaning it was in a specific area. Unlike nomad tribes who moved place to place, civilizations settled in a single place and did not move. Because of this, civilizations had a geographic boundary. So they grew those boundaries into tribes, into kingdoms, into empires, and eventually those empires, kingdoms, and such had political institutions. They would also have an economy that produced a food surplus, meaning they produced more food than that they could use. Agriculture allowed civilizations to have large food surpluses. Not everyone was needed to provide food, and they could have people working on other things other than agriculture. And we see with this a division of labor. So you might have Joe and Sally out there hunting the animals. You might have Ben and Jerry, cultivating the field, and Sally and Jennifer, making clothes. So you see, with a civilization, a division of labor. People are able to do different things. We see a concentration of a population in a distinct area or city. Large food surpluses allow an area's population to grow. Because civilizations remain in one area of farm, areas then districts, with the existence of social classes. And these develop as a result of the division of labor. There were farmers, craftsmen, merchants, soldiers, government, and other occupations. And they had different levels of importance. Someone who is a government worker is going to have more respect than someone who, cleans the latrine. We see that in civilization. Development of religion, of learning, of art, architecture. Nearly all civilizations that developed systems of religion, learning, art, architecture, these would make early societies. It also shows us that they had time to do these things. They weren't just focusing on staying alive. They had time to create art. They had time to worship. They had time to build. So that's the key of civilization. And they also have a system of record keeping. Eventually, we start to see written records. We start to see that they're having a written language. Most civilizations have a system of record keeping. Now, these record keeping systems, often developed into written languages. And today, archaeologists and historians can use these records to find out about a past and tell us about all kinds of different things, their activities, their beliefs, everything. But there were societies that left no written records, and those were mostly the Paleolithic at the very beginning. Now, these societies had characteristics of a civilization, but they left no written records, and it makes it very difficult to study them. So in order to learn about these cultures, archaeologists have to study artifacts or tools or objects that the cultures used. Tools and weapons are two types of artifacts that are often found, especially spearheads. We can even find those in Louisiana still. And that's because they were made of a strong material, and that lasts a really long time. Other parts of the society, such as like the government or the beliefs, it's hard. Without written record, it's very difficult to find them. So, that is thank you. Thank you. multiplication. Very useful. Okay, guys, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you're super interested in the early civilizations, and I will see you in class. I'm super excited to see you and to have lots of fun in class. Please let me know if you are not able to attend Class Connect sessions. And I will see you later on after I work on my Australian accent.